Hello learners, welcome to this session. This is the 8th session in its series. We are discussing MCS 221, data warehousing and data mining. In the earlier 7 sessions, we had completed 3 units of block 1. This is the 4th unit which is placed in block 2. So the title for today's discussion is Working of ETL in a data warehouse. So the basic agenda that is set for today's session is I'll introduce you to the ETL, what exactly is the full form for ETL, what is the need of ETL in data warehousing, how ETL is implemented, what is a process, complete process. We will see what are different types of loads to be updated onto the data warehouse, limitations of incremental loads. So to start with, a data warehouse, as we had seen, is a digital storage system that connects and harmonizes large amounts of data from many different sources. So here the sources may be various. Maybe the centralized database of that organization is one. The applications that are running using Salesforce or something like that, that is the second thing, using the SaaS platform. Emails may be another source of data, or else the Excel sheets may be another source of data. So all these data will be counted as and refined to store it in the data warehouse in a logical sequential in order to make perfect analysis to find out the insights. So data warehouses store current and historical data. Earlier it was only the historical data we were talking about. As the developments, recent developments as we had seen in this particular area, it is trying to retrieve the current data also from the data warehouse in one place and act it as a single source for an organization. So here we can talk 4 components of a data warehouse. The first primary component is the centralized database. The organization's centralized database constitutes as the first component of the data warehouse. Then comes the data integration part. So today's concentration, our main focus of this session is on data integration part. So here comes the ETL, extract, transform and load as the part of the data integration, and that loaded data will be residing in the data warehouse. Then comes the metadata, which is data about the data, and then the data as access tools, which are very much helpful in order to find out the insights or else in order to access the various data from the data warehouse. So the ETL stands for extract, transform and load, and this is basically a primary component wherein which it is a process of data integration that encompasses 3 steps. First one is extraction, transformation and loading. So in this session we will see what needs to be extracted, what needs to be transformed, and how many techniques are there, what are the different types of criteria that one has to keep in mind whenever the transformation of the data takes place, and after the transformation has happened, what to be loaded into the primary data warehouse or else the data mart. So that is the primary discussion. So this ETM system takes large volumes of raw data, that too available in multiple sources, convert it for analysis and load that data into the data warehouse. So this is the primary component of any data warehouse, and this particular component, either it may be coming in the form of a tool in order to pull up the data warehouse, or else the organization itself can develop its own ETL logic also. So this is the figure. You can see there are various sources, various data sources, where you can find them on the left hand side. Those are the data coming from the operational systems, the ERP data, customer relationship management data, SQL, no SQL data may be another source, and then flat files, spreadsheets. So these are various data sources which are lying on the left hand side, and there should be a kind of uniformity or logical way of combining all these particular data whichever are required and to load it into the primary database. So the between component, the ETL component or else ETL process is there standing in between the original original sources, like the original sources, data sources, and then the data warehouse on the right hand side. So here within the ETL component, there are several things happening. Like one operation may be data validation, data cleaning, data transforming, data aggregating, data loading. So there are various things happening inside that particular ETL logic. So where finds the need of introducing the ETL in a data warehouse? So ETL is nothing but it saves time on data extraction and preparation. So time that you can better spend on evaluating your own business. So no need of planning what to be taken as the primary source or source of data, which sources are needs to be identified, or else how to clean the data and then load it. So all these things kept aside. If at all you are using a tool, directly you tell these are the sources. So obviously the ETL takes care of all the things. So practicing ETL is also part of a healthy data management workflow, ensuring high data quality, availability, and reliability. So these are the needs of the ETL to be placed in between the sources of the data and the data warehouse as such. So how it is implemented? As I told you, you can use the scripts to implement ETL. You can write your own code to custom to do it yourself with the help of the code, or else you can use a dedicated ETL tool developed by any software company, given it to you, and then it will be acting as a ETL tool for converting and then loading it into the data warehouse. So here we will see all the three stages, starting with the extract stage. So this particular extract stage determines which data sources to be considered to use it for to pull the data warehouse. That is the primary concern of the extract source, and then the refresh state of each and every source. That is the second consideration that one has to see, and then the priorities between them, all of which heavily impact your time to insight. So these are the basic three things that determines the extract stage. From which source we have to take the inputs, the data sources, and then the refresh rate is the second thing, and then the priorities. So this is the third. So it involves 4 steps of process. One is exactly identifying the data to extract. So what are the primary data sources from where we have to extract the data? So that identification of data may be the centralized database, that means the relational database, the structured thing, that may be one of the primary data source of the data warehouse. NoSQL databases may be in the form of MongoDB files or else in the form of Cassandra files. And then there may be some things lying on the SaaS platforms, those also can be considered. There may be some spreadsheets, word processing documents, emails, whatnot. There are several data sources. Among them, you have to determine and you have to identify from which data source you have to extract the data. So those are the inputs. Estimate how large the data extraction is, whether it will be running only to KBs per day, or else whether it will be running to MBs, GBs, or higher than that. So those particular things you have to estimate. How often you have to pull that particular data from the data sources, and how large it is. So that thing you have to take it. Then choose the extraction method. So how to extract that particular thing, how to convert that particular thing into wherever there are data values missing, you have to find out the way how to fill those particular data. and then assess your SaaS platforms. So these are the four things, four steps of process of data extraction. Then coming to the transform stage, this particular transform stage, after the extraction has taken place, the transformation process brings clarity and order to the initial swamp. So all the data is lying in various formats here. So all of them are not directly from the relational databases. So there are files wherein which the raw files, the flat files are there, the unstructured data is there, or else partially structured data is there, fully structured data is there. Among that particular data, you have to transform it in a way wherein which it should bring the clarity and order to the initial data swamp. So maybe examples, dates and times combined into a single format, strings parsed down into their true underlying meanings, location data convert to coordinates, zip codes, or city countries. So these are some of the things, transformations that one can think of whenever the raw data needs to be transformed into the useful data. The transform step also sums up, rounds, averages, measures, and it deletes useless data and errors or discards them from later inspection. All the data that is lying in the relational database may not be considered. We have to identify what data to be considered and which is the means in order to find out the insight. So that one also we have to take into consideration. It can also mask personally identifiable information, that is called as PII, to comply with GDPR, CCPA, and other privacy requirements. So wherever you have to mask, you have to apply the masking mechanism as per the guidelines, privacy requirement. So the kind of transformation one can think to perform are, one is deduplication. So it actually does in such a way that it identifies and removes the duplicate information, like the normalization process. Key restructuring is another transformation that may be performed, that is to draw key connections from one table to another. Cleansing is another transformation that can be applied. It involves deleting the old, incomplete, and duplicate data to maximize the data accuracy, perhaps through parsing to remove syntax errors, typographical errors, and fragments of records. So this may be one of the transformation. The other format revision is one of the transformation that may be applied to convert the formats in different data sets like date, time, and other kinds of things into a uniform format. So the thing may be, the other data elements may be coming from various sources. However, there should be a common understanding, common format, which needs to be looked into in order to maintain a kind of consistency across the data warehouse. The other thing is the derivation. It creates the transformation rules to apply to the data. And then the aggregation is one of the transformation. So it is nothing but it gathers and searches data so you can present it in a summarized report format. Maybe it may be in a distributed way. However, you have to gather that particular thing and searches data so that you can present it in a summarized report format kind of thing. Then integration. So it is nothing but it reconciles diverse names, values that apply to the same data elements across the data warehouse so that each element has a standard name and definition. So one way is name of the person, and in the other data source it may be name of the employee. In the other source it may be something else, name of the candidate or something like that. There should be a common kind of standard name and definition to be given and integrated and then to be presented while loading it into the data warehouse. Filtering is one of the transformation that may be applied. Splitting may be one of the transformation. Joining may be the other transformation. Summarization, which is very much important. So in this particular summarization, it creates different business metrics by calculating value totals. For example, you might add up all the sales made by a specific salesperson to create total sales metrics for specific periods. So this is a kind of summary to be presented, and then this particular kind of summaries need to be stored in order to find out the insights from the data lying in the data warehouse. Validation thing. So it sets up automated rules to follow in different circumstances. For example, if the first 5 fields in a row are null, so then you can flag the row for investigation or prevent it from being processed with the rest of the information. So these are some of the transformation techniques which will be applied onto the data that is extracted from the data sources. The third stage, which is the final stage, is the load stage. So in this particular load stage, it is nothing but data loading is the process of loading the extracted information into your target data repository. Here, the data repository is nothing but the data warehouse, or it may be a data mart. So after the complete transformation is being done, so data needs to be loaded into the original data warehouse or else the data repository. This load phase also determines whether loading will be happening incrementally or if it will require upsert. Here upsert is nothing but it is updating the existing data and inserting new data for the new batches of data. Here upsert is nothing but whatever the data. For the first time when we pull up the data warehouse, so it may take some hours or else days together to pull up the data warehouse. Because suppose if we are planning for pulling the data for past 10 years, so after the ETL and everything is completed, it may take to load, it may take some few hours for a very big company, or else for a MNC it may take 1 or 2 days also. Afterwards, you have to think either batch-wise incremental, or else you may think either whatever the data that is coming new, that needs to be updated. So that particular feature called as upsert, UPSERT, is the updating existing data and inserting the new data. So that needs to be think of whenever the load stage is considered. So in this particular load stage, loading is an ongoing process that could happen through. First process is full loading. So the first time whatever that we are loading from the original data sources after the ETL has been done, so it requires a kind of full loading of the data warehouse. And then from then onwards, incremental loading will be the second option. So as you update the data warehouse with new information, whichever field has some changes, updates, or else new data, so only those particular things needs to be updated in the data warehouse. So full loading is loading the data fully into the data warehouse for the first time, and then from then onwards there will be a kind of incremental loading of the data warehouse. So in this particular two types of load phases, that is the full loading or else the incremental loading. Incremental loading plays the major role because full loading is only for one time, but the incremental loading will be happening throughout till the data warehouse is still alive. So in this particular incremental loading, it is not just one particular method that we follow. However, incremental loads extract and load information that has appeared since the last increment load. Maybe for every 10 minutes, the refreshment cycle we had defined it as for 10 minutes. So whenever we are refreshing that particular data, so it may be for every 10 minutes it will be seeing, and then it will be updating with the new data or else the changes that are there applicable for the particular 10 minutes, and then it will be re-uploading. So this can happen in two ways. One is batch incremental loads, and the second is the streaming incremental loads. Batch incremental load is nothing but the data warehouse ingests information in packets or batches. So if the large packets or large batches are there, it may take some definite time, maybe some minutes to hours, or else maybe daily you can thought of having the batch incremental loads, because quite often for every 10 minutes or so you may not be defining that particular cycle as the refresh cycle. However, you may be defining it as the batch increment may be happening in a 24-hour cycle, or else weekly, or else monthly. So this is how you'll be planning whenever you are going for the batch incremental loads. However, modern databases can also ingest small batches of information on minute-to-minute basis, that too live, that too real time on an ETL platform. Like there are several tools available, or else several incremental tools are available called as Xplenty and other kinds of things, which helps you to refresh those particular things quite often. So that too within a little batches. So whenever we consider the second part or a second methodology, so there the data, whatever that is updated, will be a very much a little. It should not exist in the form of GBs or petabytes. So here, whenever you are thinking of having it minute by minute or else within every 10 minutes or half an hour, so it should be only very less amount of data needs to be updated. Then only it is a meaningful updation. The second method we are talking about is the streaming incremental loads. So here streaming itself says that whatever that is coming needs to be updated. So the data warehouse ingests new data as it appears in real time. So in the definition also, earlier we used to give only historical, from the historical data we will be finding out the insights by analyzing them. But after the advancement in the data warehouse area, currently even on the real-time data also, the insights can be found out. So the data warehouse ingests new data as it appears in the real time. This method is particularly valuable when the end users requires real-time updates. So for example, for each and every minute, there is a kind of decision that needs to be made. So then we will be going for the streaming incremental loads other than the batch incremental loads, which will be happening only in a 24-hour cycle or else weekly or else monthly refresh cycles. However, when we think of such kind of use case, then you have to go for the streaming incremental loads, which will be updating for each and every 3 minutes or 5 minutes, and it will be giving you the insights with the real-time data. So these are possible when the updates involve a very small amount of data, changes in the very small amount of data. Suppose if the changes are very large, it will take time. But when you think that the little bit of changes and that too happening in every 3 to 5 minutes, then those particular things can be allowed as a streaming incremental loads. So after discussing all these loading techniques, two kinds of loading techniques, there are certain challenges also. So whenever there are data structure changes, so it should be kept at a minimal pace. Suppose if the data source, if you are thinking of the data structure shows, including some sort of columns or something like that. So it may be affecting the ETL as well as the data warehouse itself. So this is one of the challenge. And the second challenge is processing data in the wrong order. So you have to find out like what kind of data needs to be taken as input and then how to process this. There should be a kind of logical connectivity and logical mechanism that needs to define in a first moment itself, and then you have to strictly follow that particular thing. Then the third thing is failure to the detect problem. Instead of waiting for a long time after the failure has happened, you have to continuously monitor, and then you have to find out in the preliminary stages itself, other than that the failure to detect, if at all it is after a later stage, it may be affecting and giving the insights improperly. So with this, I'll end the session. In this particular session, we have seen the primary aspects of the ETL, extract, transform, and load, and what exactly are the processes involved in each and every stage that we had seen. And then we had seen the types of loading, the two types of incremental loading, and then what are the challenges that the incremental loading, on behalf of the incremental loading happened. So with this, I conclude the session. Hope you understood it. Otherwise, you please read, for the additional inputs, you please read Unit 4 of Block 2, MCS 221, Data Warehousing and Data Mining. Thank you.